Thank you all for coming. This is a wonderful turnout, both in person and online. As Kevin said, there are members from other NMIs online, as well as potentially in other RMOs around the world. So I'll be giving you a brief introduction on ionizing radiation measurements in the Americas and beyond. So before I start, I want to acknowledge that where we are having this presentation is situated on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the 𝐦𝐞𝐽𝐻𝐸𝐿 Nation. So ionizing radiation, it is used throughout our daily lives and in multiple areas of application, from healthcare and used in diagnostic imaging and radiotherapy of cancer, something that will affect almost everybody in the room, to industrial radiations, so for sterilization of food and medical devices, to radiation protection, the need to monitor nuclear power plants or accelerator facilities, as well as to be used in nuclear forensics, power generation, especially the advent of small modular nuclear reactors. And it's not just an exclusively man-made phenomena. It exists in nature, having radioactivity in air and food and so on. And so this is also an opportunity to study environmental effects. And I'll quote our spiritual leader, Malcolm McEwen, a lot of people know him here, that metrology is essentially historical. And he said, "The work performed today ensures that the measurements of tomorrow can properly be linked to the results of yesterday." So where do reliable measurements come from? Metrology is certainly not new. It is mentioned in antiquity. It's usually linked to trade and established in legal metrology, and even exists in the Bible. And in addition to that, also there's weights and measures in the Magna Carta. But for metrologists, it all started for us 150 years ago with the meter convention. This was signed 150 years ago in Paris. And what it did was it established a structure to agree upon a system of units, established an organization, the International Committee for Weights and Measures, over which we could join and meet and discuss matters of international measurement standards. And this successful agreement continues to be expanded upon. As of January, there were 64 member states and 34 associate states and economies. In 2019, there was a big redefinition of the system of units that we love so dearly, and it fixed a number of constants. So the hyperfine transition frequency, which defines the second, the speed of light was fixed many years ago. Planck's constant was fixed, and that featured well in the redefinition of the kilogram, the electric charge, Boltzmann's constant, Avogadro's number, as well as the candela. So in ionizing radiation, this is a sort of an org chart of what came out of the meter convention. And what was most important, at least for those who are in the metrology laboratories, is that he established a laboratory, the BIPM, the Bureau International des Points de Mesure. And what the BIPM does allows us to meet and establish and run comparisons on various various units. And they contribute to conferences, host lots of meetings, and most importantly, also transfer knowledge to other NMIs or designated institutes or countries that are wishing to expand on that or get involved in metrology. Now, one of the things that I did sort of mention up there is from these working groups, which is where all the work does. There are these consultative committees, and they have a consultative committee for almost all of the different units of measure. And for us, it's the CCRI. That's RI because it's in French, Rayonnement et Ionizing. And what do these do? Well, it's a forum for meeting and consulting. So definitions and quantities are agreed upon, and then they offer advice to that overarching organization as to what needs to be done, where the demands are, and provides input to an overall strategy on the international stage. Now, unlike any other CC, the CCRI is special in that it actually has three very distinct different groups that cover three very different areas of ionizing radiation, those being dosimetry, radioactivity, and neutrons. And just to show you that we do meet, these are your three CCRIs, CCRI 1, 2, and 3, in that order. And for the Canadians in the room, there are your Canadian representatives, some of which are, these are quite old pictures, so it's a lot less white. So let me stick with history and carry on with a brief history of ionizing radiation. This is a slide from someone at NPL, Alan Jennings. NPL is the National Metrology Institute for the UK. And he put this together for the centenary of the discovery of X-rays. And this year, just this month, in fact, we're celebrating 130 years of that discovery. Now, shortly after the discovery, metrology was already being used. And in fact, in this chart, if you squint, you can see that a lot of the key detector technologies that we still use today were already being implicated. And soon after that, the infrastructure and technology rapidly improved. And as early as the 1920s, we started already performing comparisons. And like we like to do in the metrology, also have an agreed upon definitions and formalisms. So they say in the 1950s and 60s, this is when the field started to explode. And this is a point of pride that the first treatment using cobalt-60 happened in Canada. And so that is a Canadian invention. Shortly thereafter, it's spread. And the CCRI that I aforementioned, or at least its predecessor, was formed shortly in 1958. And in 1960, the Ionizing Radiation Department of the BIPM began operation. So metrologists often like to show this traceability or pyramid. And it essentially shows that any of the measurements that we do in our laboratories should have an unbroken, unchained calibrations back to the SI, the system of units that I mentioned. And the order goes back to the SI, which is the top of the pyramid. But as you go down, each calibration adds a little bit of an uncertainty. And so the uncertainty typically doesn't always have to, but typically increases. And so what this does is it allows us to give us confidence in our measurements that everybody's agreeing on the same sort of thing. And what I'm showing here is an example of something you can find freely available on the KCDB, the Key Comparison Database that is maintained by the BIPM, of a comparison of the measurement of radioactivity, in this case, cobalt-60. Along the x-axis, these are different National Metrology Institutes, and you can see we agree very well. And in fact, there's our Canadian value. And this reason I put this particular comparison up is it selfishly was the first one that I participated in. So we're doing quite well. So a little bit of history now, switching to SIM. SIM is actually, as Kevin indicated, it's an acronym stands for Sistema Interamericano de Metrologia. And it has a very old history. It's one of the first RMOs to be established and organized, which began with a number of workshops and conferences in the early 1970s until 1979, when it was formalized. So while it is one of the oldest, it's also one of the youngest, in that it is one of the last NMIs, or RMOs, regional metrological organizations, to become a legal entity, and that happened in 2017. So we have 33 active members, 15 associates, and other affiliate members. And currently, there's a membership is pending for Suriname and Cuba. Cuba is an interesting one because currently it is a member of the 𝐸𝐴𝐽𝐿, which is the Eastern European Regional Metrology Organization. And then in the Americas, we again like to classify different things. So we have the other different sub-regional groups that participate. So membership has its privileges. I just want to give you a quick taste of what we have been hearing about and all the activities that happen within our membership. And so this is, as far as I know, the first symposium that has ever occurred. At NIST, they are investigating innovative cryogenic detectors. And so this you have incredible precision and resolution to measure fundamental beta spectra and other applications. In Mexico, they are performing metrology at a mile high. And so there's a lot of things that we do not have to worry about that they do. Our colleagues in St. Kitts and Nevis, Bureau of Standards, they are coordinating an external beam dosimetry in the Caribbean. It's an expensive thing for a very small country to do. And so in the Caribbean, they're looking to share resources and see if when they can perform and disseminate the dosimetry standards. BIPM in Uruguay has been a longtime member of the IAA SSDL network. They are also where Uruguay is where SIM is incorporated. In Argentina, they have most recently been doing AMS, so accelerating mass spectroscopy and determination of bio-based carbon. The reason I wanted to show this particular picture is that Van der Graaf actually used to be in M35 and ended up having another life in Argentina. Our newest member, SIMposium. I think I saw Gerardo just enter the so while they're new, they're very experienced metrologists and have been disseminating dosimetry standards in their country for many years. In CCHEN, they're investigating the expansion of chemical dosimeters, and at the LNMRI in Brazil, they are securing the future of short-lived radionuclide comparisons. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And finally, the IAEA is very critical to many countries. They operate the SSDL network for developing countries and throughout even the Americas. And the IAEA as an organization spends time in different regional metrology organizations. And at the moment, they are a member of SIM. So I was mentioning the development that our Brazilian colleagues are pursuing. But before I tell you about this, the way we will be performing comparisons of short-lived radionuclides, I have to tell you about the SIR, which is the Système International de Référence. And what this is essentially a detector that sits at the BIPM, allows us, any of the NMIs throughout the world, to send an ampoule of material to be measured in the SIR, and allows us to do an ad hoc comparison for that radioactivity, for those specifically gamma-emitting radioisotopes. And it has been extremely, extremely successful. So successful that we've extended it with the ESIR to pure beta and alpha emitting radioisotopes. And the problem is this is all well and good if you have a very long-lived isotope, because as maybe some of us know in this room, it is difficult to get things across international borders. And when you put the word radioactive on it, it gets even more complicated and difficult, if not impossible. So the BIPM thought about this and created a CIRTI, a transfer instrument, but it really should be called a traveling instrument, because what this is another detector that goes to a particular NMI, allows them to measure there at the local instrument, and that this detector is linked back to our beloved SIR and permits us to continue making these ad hoc comparisons. And so this is critical, if not the only way we can do a comparison for very short-lived radionuclides. However, it still has to come to one NMI. And so at best, you can that it comes to your continent once every 5 years. And even then, it has to go to different NMIs within it. So it is not a perfect solution, and it has a lot of demand on it. And so if one is good, why not make more? And so this is what we're pursuing here in SIM and the Asia Pacific region, the RMO for the Asia Pacific region are building the regional CERTI. And so these will circulate within our RMOs, and then they will be linked to that BIPM CERTI and hence back to the SIR that we require. And in fact, if 3 is good, why not make 2 more? In fact, the APMP is quite a large region. They have decided to actually go and make 3 copies. So the hope here is to share the workload, increase the number of comparisons that we can do, and shorten that queue. This is just a picture from IRD showing that all the infrastructure is in place. A lot of calibrations and commissioning are being done as we speak, and hopefully this can be ready to undergo testing as early as January of next year. So given this intro, the rest of the speakers are going to be extremely interesting, and we'll hear about metrology and isotope production in our backyard, metrology in Germany, and finally, metrology and fundamental physics, something that perhaps we don't always think about, as we are always thinking about the applications at the other end of the spectrum. So with that, thank you, merci, gracias, and obrigado. And I just wanted to, these are the individuals I borrowed liberally from. Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to have Randy Perron here from CNL, Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, just up the road. He joined CNL in 2013 as a chemistry materials technologist in the reactor chemistry and corrosion branch. So he was working on the accelerators and as well as the NRU reactor, which was shut down in 2011.
2018.
2011, I keep thinking of the crisis there.
Oh, yeah.
But he's moved on, and he's now established clinical radiochemistry capabilities at CNL, such as conjugation, radiolabeling, and purification to support the development of new highly effective targeted alpha therapy isotopes, in particular actinium-225, which we will be hearing from today.
Thanks a lot. So yeah, thanks a lot for the invite to come and speak today. I'm looking forward to the presentations and some discussions after. So my name is Randy Perron. I'm a technical manager at CNL in the area of isotopes. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you all today about our production of actinium-225. So I'll first just start with a bit of a history lesson similar to Rafe. So you may be familiar with CNL through your work or perhaps AACL previously. So Atomic Energy of Canada Limited is essentially the Canadian government's crown corporation that handles primarily nuclear power and other related applications. And our Chalk River site, which is about 2 hours northwest of here, is essentially the birthplace of the nuclear industry in Canada, where we had the first man-made criticality outside of the US. It's where we developed the technology for the CANDU heavy water reactors. And it was a major supplier of medical isotopes through the NRU reactor for many years. So the cobalt-60 that we discussed previously. And then at one point, I think we were producing about 80% of the world's moly-99. So the NRU government decision was made to shut it down in 2018. At that time, it was the oldest operating reactor in the world at, I think, 61 years. So it made a lot of sense from a risk aversion perspective, but it was a big hit to our ability to produce isotopes and a lot of the supporting experimental infrastructure that went along with that, with neutron scattering and spectroscopy as well. But we did still have a pretty strong core radiochemistry program at CNL. So we looked at what we could do to sort of rebirth isotope production at Chalk River with the capabilities that we still have. So if we flip over, around the same time of the shutdown, it was actually in 2017, the government decided, or AECL decided, that it would switch into what's known as a government-owned contractor-operated model. So it's a similar laboratory management model that a lot of the national labs in the US have, where all of the physical infrastructure, the IP, essentially all of the tangible assets still belong to the government, but the operations are managed by a contractor. So that's known as Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. That's who I work for. I was with AECL previously. And a large effort has been conducted under this new regime to revitalize the Chalk River site. A lot of the buildings, were born out of necessity at the time for the needs of the programs back then. So we have quite literally hundreds of buildings that need attention, whether that's decommissioning or some type of control. But then the other side of that is using a pretty significant government investment to build new capabilities as well. And so, for example, even the research labs that I manage at CNL are in one of our newest radiochemistry buildings. So if we flip over to actinium-225, so what is it? It's an alpha-emitting radioisotope, belongs to the neptunium alpha decay series, half-life of about 9.92 days, and it has a pretty interesting decay cascade from itself down to the sort of quasi-stable bismuth-209, and its parent isotopes are quite interesting too. We'll talk more about that. It releases a lot of energy in its decay to stability on the order of 30 MeV as a combination of its successive alpha decays and beta decays. And you can see a really nice picture of a glowing actinium vial taken there in long exposure, low light setting, likely from the US DOE. So what can we use the actinium-225 for? It's targeted alpha therapy, which is sort of a subset of targeted radionuclide therapy, which is where we're using a radioactive isotope coupled to a biological vector that has a high affinity for surface receptors on cancer cells. So this can be used both for diagnostic and therapeutic, where you're tagging that biomolecule with your radioisotope, and when it's administered to the patient, it will essentially naturally locate to the tumor environment and either effectively display where the disease is or potentially treat it. So you can kind of see that diagrammatically on the bottom left there. So what's great about alphas for this reason is that they carry a lot of energy, and because of their high relative mass and charge, they deposit all that energy in a very short distance, right? Very high LET. So they can be fairly precise in where they deposit that energy, targeting the cancerous cells, but not targeting your healthy cells. So you can see, an approximate representation of that on the bottom right, where relative to the size of a tumor cell, the alpha doesn't travel very far, whereas the sort of scattered walk that a beta particle would take is a lot longer. That's not to say that beta therapeutics are not very effective as well. They are. There can be off-target effects coming from a beta, but there is a real complement between the two, where depending on the size of the tumor metastases and the tumor environment, both can be effective in different ways. So how do we make actinium-225? So the sort of classical means for producing it is from the decay of thorium-229, which is a fairly long-lived, 7,000-year half-life. I don't think my half-life figure is accurate there, but so essentially, if you have some thorium-229, it's not going anywhere in our time reference. But thankfully, its daughter progeny have relatively short half-lives. Radium-225 about 15 days, and the actinium about 10, followed by the really short half-life successions after that. Such that if you start with essentially a bare source of thorium-229, its progeny isotopes approach secular equilibrium over time. So on the order of about 30 days, you can yield approximately 50% of your original thorium-229 activity as actinium-225. Another nice thing about this decay sequence is the ingrowth of the radium-225 happens sequentially. So if you can isolate that, after you strip out your actinium-225, you can continue to recycle your radium-225 and essentially milk it for all it's worth to make as much as possible. So as I mentioned, this is sort of the classical means by which actinium-225 has been produced. It's been dating back to like the mid-90s when the experiments were first started on this. The ultimate source of thorium-229 in the world comes from uranium-233, which is a special nuclear material, can't be used in a weapon, so is not produced anymore, and very limited global supply of that. So we'll talk a little more about other technologies that are coming online soon. But if we dig into this generator production and what we do at CNL a little bit more, so we have a routine production where we elute our thorium generator approximately every 28 days, depending on our production schedule. And then we always keep 3 radium-225 generators in action in a kind of one in, one out situation where we continue to milk from those. And that allows us to produce about 8 millicuries per month, 300 megabecquerels, which is a little and a lot, depending on your perspective. From the perspective of making measurements, even doing studies in cells and mice for safety and efficacy of the pharmaceuticals, it's a lot. You can do a ton with that. If you kind of bridge over into the clinical realm, it's just enough. Like we can make maybe 10 to 20 patient doses per month worth. But the value chain towards the clinic is also very long. It's with the 10-day half-life, there's a lot of checks and balances that have to happen along the way. So ultimately, this is not something that we can stand to treat a lot of people with. We got our own little glowing blue vial picture last year, which was nice. So diving into the chemistry a little bit on the process that we use to make the actinium. So that thorium-229 it's the critical raw material. We can't lose that, right? If we lose any thorium-229, our capacity for actinium production just goes down proportionally. So it's very important that we take good care of that. So the first step in our process is we want to retain all of that thorium. We do that by keeping it in a solution of fairly concentrated nitric acid, where the thorium forms a negative nitrato complex, which can be retained on an anion exchange resin. The radium-225 and actinium-225 don't form those complexes, so they freely wash through the resin. And then we can concentrate the actinium-225 using extraction chromatography. And essentially, we go from about a process volume of 2 liters at the beginning of our process down to our actinium concentrate in about 2 milliliters. From then, we'll measure what we have there for our batch yield and then dispense that out into our customer vials. The customer vials get dried down. We ship as a dry product. It sort of helps with the logistics if you don't have liquids sloshing around in your vials. It also allows the end user to reconstitute that activity into their desired concentration or solution composition. That activity is consigned with a dose calibrator, which we've done some work with Raphael and NRC on. I'll talk a little more about, and it gets shipped out in a Type A package. And then in the meantime, we're also doing our quality control on the actinium. So we have to measure its chemical purity. We use ICP-MS for that. Its radionuclide purity, which we use gamma spectroscopy. And we also test its radio labeling efficiency under fixed conditions, which is sort of an empirical chemical purity measurement. Lots of more intricate details to that are in our paper on that topic, and I won't belabor the chemistry too much more. So just some accomplishments that we've been able to make from our generator. So this was initially funded as a federal initiative. In about 2016, we began looking at what materials we had available on site to extract thorium-229 from. We had a modest supply of that, and we began our shipments in 2017, so not long after that. And we kind of became commercial in 2020. Since then, we've made about 200 shipments, both to universities that we collaborate with on CAN-B measurements, CAN-B core radiochemistry, radio labeling, all the way into preclinical investigations. And as well, we also do sell the material commercially. And a big kudos to our technical staff who run the production here, because that's really who makes this all happen. Is, you know, they give up weekends and they spend a lot of their working time making sure that we're doing this to schedule and to quality. So if we expand a little more on the global supply of actinium-225, there was a really nice paper published a couple of years ago called Alpha Atlas that describes where all of the different alpha emitting isotopes are being produced around the world. And they've got sections for each of the relevant ones. Actinium's always first on the list because everyone's so interested in it. So within Canada, you can see it's quite restricted. There's just CNL, Triumph and BWXT, which essentially they work together where they're irradiating at Triumph and processing at BWXT. And then in Europe and the US, there's a fair number, but it's important to note that some of these producers are not core producers where they're actually making the radioisotope from some other material. They're like a GMP redistributor, or like they're selling this to pharmaceutical companies. So it's quite restricted. The current global production, the estimates they were pretty solid when everyone was just using a thorium-229 cow because we knew where those all were. Now everyone's kind of going at it in different means, but we're still only producing about 2 to 3 curies of usable actinium-225, which at the end of that value chain can only sustain, let's say, 1,000 to 10,000 treatments per year. The other thing is that depending on how the isotope is made, its impurity profile and its overall quality can be quite different. That can just be between 2 manufacturers using the same method, or definitely across manufacturers that are using very different production methods. And so the reason why we need a secure supply of the radioisotopes is really to get the radiopharmaceuticals into the clinic. So because these are drugs, you know, they're licensed by the FDA or Health Canada or the EMA. And so there's a pretty extensive, obviously, you know, development that has to happen there through preclinical, clinical trial stage, and then eventually approval. So there's only one alpha emitting radionuclide currently approved for use in a radiopharmaceutical, and that's radium-223, which is administered as just the simple chloride salt of radium-223, known as Xofigo. It sort of paved the way for alpha emitters, but it's also non-targeted. It doesn't have that biological molecule coupled onto it. It's just a bone seeker, essentially, for palliative treatment of bone metastases. So in order to drive, say, our actinium to the market, we need to be able to supply the radiopharmaceutical companies with enough of it so that they can plan, schedule, and fulfill their clinical trials, because the regulators will not approve something that has overstretched supply, right? It's very important that if it gets prescribed, that the patient can get it, right? So if we look at the other production routes for actinium-225, this is not exhaustive. There are some others, but these are sort of the ones that are most relevant today. So we talked about the generator, which is what we do on our federal program. That's available for commercial and collaborative work, but limited in capacity. We have thorium-232 proton irradiation, which requires a very high energy proton accelerator, at least 100 MeV. So there's a couple of those in the US doing that. That's what they're doing at Triumph. They do it limited in South Africa, but generally speaking, it's not very accessible. It can make a lot of actinium, but one of the key downsides to that is that it produces an impurity isotope, actinium-227, which has a 22-year half-life, which is not the most savory thing for administering to a person, but that doesn't actually end up being the main limiting thing. It's the management of the wastes that arise from the treatment of the people, because even their excrements are considered radioactive waste at that point. And then the more advanced techniques are the ones involving radium-226 irradiation. So the first one being the photonuclear route, which is where you use an electron linac to bombard a converter and make Bremsstrahlung that initiates a gamma-induced reaction on radium-226. And then finally, the proton irradiation of radium-226, which can be done with a medical cyclotron, so on the order of 15 to 20 MeV. There's a lot of those around. There's quite a few of them in Canada. So that's the technology that we've decided to take to the new level. And we're doing that as a commercial joint venture known as Actinier, which is a new Canadian company. Just flip here, which is a 50-50 joint venture between Canadian Nuclear Labs and ITM, which is a German radiopharmaceutical manufacturer. So we've now begun, we're through our proof of concept stage, and we're into kind of late stage development and testing of our production technology for actinium through cyclotron irradiation of radium, where we perform the target development, irradiation, and processing, and then we ship an actinium product to ITM, who does final GMP processing, market distribution. And a highlight from there, the Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council awarded us just this year with an innovation award for being the first group to produce actinium-225 from a cyclotron bombardment in Canada. And that was in conjunction with the Fedoric Center, who does our irradiations in Saskatoon, and ACSI, who is a cyclotron manufacturer, and then they make the auxiliary systems like the targets. So it took a lot of people. That's just a small portion, honestly, of the amount of people involved just at CNL alone to make this happen, because the difficulties of the handling of the radium material in our hot cell facilities, developing a safe target for irradiation, and then making a high quality product out of that has been a lot of work. So we'll get out of the commercial stuff now and talk a little more about the measurements of actinium-225. So as I mentioned, actinium-225 has this pretty neat decay cascade where it's got some really short-lived progeny and then a couple longer-lived ones in there. So if we start from a nominal, say, 1 becquerel source of actinium-225, its first progeny isotope, francium-221, will reach equilibrium in a pretty short time, as little as about a half an hour. Whereas the longer lived, there's sort of a holdup at bismuth-213 because it has a 45-minute half-life. So you can see this ingrowth curve here, where it reaches a near state where it would sort of be ready for equivalent measurements around 6 hours. And then if you extend that out a little longer, you can see lagging behind is this lead-209, which is essentially a pure beta emitter. Doesn't affect measurements very much, but you really don't reach that true sort of equilibrium state until probably about 1 day later, practically. So if you think about taking these measurements, then if you're manipulating the chemistry of the actinium, so we've got a lot of different elements in that mix. We've got actinium, a 3+ metal, acts a lot like a lanthanide. You've got francium, which is a alkali metal, and then say bismuth, which is sort of like this metalloid kind of thing. It does whatever it wants. So if you do some separation chemistry to isolate your actinium, you've probably skewed that equilibrium a lot, where some things have gone one place and others have gone the other. So if you look at freshly separated actinium-225, these are just simulated gamma spectra. You've got a really nice peak showing up from the francium-221, but it's probably not at equilibrium yet. And you're just starting to grow in a little bit of bismuth. 30 minutes later, you've got a much stronger francium-221, but you're still lagging behind your bismuth. And then not until about 6 hours do you sort of start to see this thing look like what it should for actinium. And yeah, the lead-209, which takes a little bit longer, tends to have negligible impact on gross activity measurements. So in a practical radiochemistry lab where we're doing synthesis of the radiopharmaceuticals or even just the isotope, what does that mean? It typically means that there's a delay period between any work that could interrupt that equilibrium and then the subsequent counting. So depending on the technique being used, that will dictate your essentially minimum measurement delay time. So for something like gamma spec, where you've got that really good energy resolution and you can pick out francium 221, you're good to go after 30 minutes likely, and you can be confident in that measurement. Alpha spec would be the same, but of course, alpha spec typically requires a more tedious source preparation, whether you're doing a co-precipitation or drying on a disc or something like that. Now, the dose calibrator, which is a common instrument used in radiopharmaceutical field, is just a gas-filled ionization chamber, so it really has no ability to quantify these isotopes separately. So that requires a pretty substantial amount of time before you can have a confident measurement. And if you think about the workflow when you're handling a radioisotope with a 10-day half-life, trying to get it attached to a biomolecule, quality control it, which all of these techniques are used for its quality control, it really does dictate how these things work. Your liquid scintillation counting, of course, can do it, but depending on your configuration, the energy resolution can work or not. Radio TLC, which is a common means, that's thin layer chromatography for qualifying radiopharmaceuticals. It requires decay time, so you're letting your plates sit and decay until you can count them. And then HPLC, which is a workflow, like sort of workflow workhorse for radiochemistry labs, is also hindered by this delay time, because you're either collecting fractions off of the HPLC, letting them equilibrate, and then counting them, or you have to do some pretty fancy online LSC that gives you some energy resolution. So some work that we did with the NRC was establishing a calibration factor for the dose calibrator for actinium-225 that's at equilibrium. So the calibration factors for these instruments are, they're just a multiplier for the electrical signal that's being generated. And there's been a lot of publications starting in the 2000s to now that have given approximate calibration numbers for these isotopes. And honestly, when the industry doesn't have a lot of guidance on what to use, they're going to use what's in the paper, right? So it's very important that we start to standardize these things so that everyone is doing the same thing. And that was our core reasoning for wanting to do this, is to really have confidence in our measurements of the actinium. So we were able to send number of samples of our actinium in liquid and dry form down here for them to be certified, and took a ton of measurements on our dose calibrators, a number of different models that we have at CNL, to establish what that calibration factor should be. I think since then, there's also been additional publications that have shown a really consistent finding with this, so that's really good for us. And yeah, ultimately, when we look to send out our product, it really gives us that confidence, and it's such a quick check with the dose calibrator, about 5 seconds for a measurement to be taken, that we're sending what the customer wants. Their billing's going to be accurate, all of that sort of. Then a little further down the workflow chain with working with the isotope, then, okay, you've measured it dry in a vial, but now we need to play with it, right? So both in the laboratory and in the clinic, there's going to be a number of different geometries that this solution of bearing the actinium will be in at different states of equilibrium, of course. And then depending on the attenuation of its layers, if it's a plastic centrifuge tube, a glass vial, going into the clinic in syringes and serum vials. Important to know if there's any correction required for that accurate measurement, because you're kind of getting closer to the point that you're going to administer to a patient, right? So the dosimetry and giving the right dose is quite important. And a really valuable exercise that we were able to do with NRC was hosting them at CNL to make measurements in a number of these different geometries at different fill levels to assess what correction would be needed. And thankfully, actually, very little correction is needed across all of these geometries. It's very insignificant, I guess, from the perspective of a patient dosimetry. But it's important that we communicate these results too, so that the broad global use of actinium is supported in these findings, and people know what to do. On to the more kind of specialized measurement techniques. So alpha spectroscopy, it's feasible for actinium-225 measurement, but preparation of the thin sources is kind of tedious. You usually would use a cerium fluoride precipitation and filtration onto membranes. That time that it takes to do that, the waste that it generates, and then you've also got to probably use a yield tracer for working those numbers back up, makes it such that it's mostly impractical. We don't do this very often, only in cases where we're looking for impurities in the actinium-225. And the astatine-211 peak is quite nicely resolved. You can see it in the middle there. So for counting that's kind of our go-to. But yeah, the real workhorse is gamma spec, where after that francium equilibrium is formed, we can measure this 218 keV peak here. If the situation's right and we do have equilibrium, we can definitely use the bismuth as well. But for quicker workflows, the francium is better. Works on liquid and dry geometries, of course. Been a couple of those today, I think.
At least just a bit.
And so that's all I have to discuss today. I swear I am not the subject of so feel free to raise your hands with any questions, or if there's anyone online.
So I've said again, this week we've been very actually fortunate to have a couple of visitors from the PTB visiting our group. And so I jumped on the chance to have our next speaker give a short presentation to us today. That is Dr. Rolf Behrens. He's the head of the working group on dosimetry for brachytherapy and beta radiation protection. So he's a very experienced metrologist. He's also responsible for quality assurance in the division of ionizing radiation. So again, something that's very important to all of us in metrology and elsewhere. And maybe most importantly for the NRC folk here, he's an extensive user of XNRC code. So, well.
Yeah, thank you very much for this kind invitation, which I actually got during my last vacation in October, and then this topic was interesting to me. And despite of having vacation, I went into it. Thanks for this opportunity. I hope this meets your interest. So ionizing radiation metrology, in your first announcement, it was Germany. Actually, I only speak of PTB mostly, but in the beginning, give a small framework of it. And so, as he mentioned, Raphael from the Department Radiation Protection Dosimetry at PTB, and Phil Bruggemann, colleague of mine, is with me here for this week. So that's what you, already saw on the left-hand side. That is the SIM. To give it a framework, other regional metrology organizations are available. So, and ours is, of course, Euromet, so the European Metrology Organization. And it is subdivided into actually 38 member states. So Europe has many different nationalities. And within these member states, we have 152 institutes. So very large amount. Most of them, that is 120, are acknowledged as NMI or designated institute. By the way, the presentation can be distributed as PDF afterwards, and all these light blue are hyperlinks to the corresponding bases of information. So in Europe, we have many languages, and we have therefore mostly peer reviews only in similar languages. For example, in German as language, we have peer review in collaboration with Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, as I speak also German. And there are some other country groups that perform something similar. And so we have actually in Euromet 73 projects in this way. And so we make sure we have on one hand side peer reviews, but on the other hand side there is PVs at least working horses internal audits. And so over Euromet, approximates 50% of these 120 institutes goes via self-declaration of the quality system. management and 50% approximately on accreditation. So to my knowledge, in other parts, in other RMOs, more is based on accreditation, but this is a situation in Europe actually. So this is all over metrology, these numbers here. Actually, it's also available on this Euromed webpage. You can search for ionizing radiation institutes, and there you got a hit of 36 institutes spread over Europe. So coming to PDB, that's the National Metrology Institute of Germany, as you mentioned before. So our bases are fundamentals are metrology and make it for society and for the economy. That is most important to us, and also to international affairs. And as you can see here, we are self-declared according to ISO 17025, post 34, reference materials and 65. And with this, we go with the CIPM, MRR, and our calibration certificates are in line with that system. At the lower left, you'll find a hyperlink to the self-declaration that's freely available on PDB's website, as well as our head quality management handbook of PDB is also freely available. This one in English, all of our sub documents are in German only. That's freely available on PDB's website. As mentioned, you can have the presentation as PDF. So just a short history of PDB. Beginnings of metrology in our site 135 years ago, approximately, namely founded in 1887. So what's it, 12 years after the media convention. So this is a picture of PDB foundation area in Berlin at the German Ridge at that time, around 1900. This original building is still in use. And actually, PDB was at that time already 100% governmental. So it was founded on the English, founded by the German Ridge, actually the emperor. We had an emperor at that time, Wilhelm II. And so it was, this foundation was initiated by none less but Werner von Siemens, who wanted to make sure that we have progress in industry. Hermann von Helmholtz, he stood for science and measurement. He was actually the first president of PDB. And lastly, not so well known and famous, but William Förster, who wanted to have made sure that trustful measurements are available, and with this laid the basics for legal metrology, at least at PDB. So, as mentioned before, we are 100% governmental authority under the authority of the Federal Ministry for Economy and Energy, because we are of importance for our economy and also abroad. Staff members approximately 2,100, approximately 1/3 of them non-permanent. Budget, you can see here, and 60% is research and development, approximately 30% services, so calibrations, etc., and type testing, 10% consulting, not only for German politicians, but also standardization workers of importance, IEEA, ICIU, etc. So the main site is Braunschweig, you can see up on the right, and in Berlin we have 2 sites. Just to give you a picture of it, so you see here Europe, and nearly in the center is Germany located, and Germany is subdivided into 16 counties. So in Lower Saxony, we have this, the main site located in Braunschweig, where at least Phil and myself are working, and the foundation site is Berlin in the city center, Charlottenburg, and the lower east of Berlin, we have a synchrotron radiation facility, not operated by us, but we have a beamline, basic 2, so-called. Division structure of PDB reads somehow like a textbook of physics. So we have division on mechanics and acoustics, division on electricity, on chemical physics, optics, precision engineering, and ionizing radiation. These 6 are located in Braunschweig. Then we have temperature and synchrotron radiation located in Berlin, as well as medical physics. And finally, we have legal and international affairs and technical and administrative services, both also located in Braunschweig. So most part is located in Braunschweig. I would now like to highlight the ionizing radiation division of PDB. So our scheme is the use of and protection against ionizing radiation. We disseminate SI units, becquerel, Gray, and Sievert, and of course some more units, but these are the SI units we cover. And our structure is as follows, namely we have 4 departments, one on radioactivity. You see also the name of the department heads, radioactivity, dosimetry for therapy and diagnostic, then radiation protection, dosimetry, our department, and neutron radiation. Finally, a section on operational radiation protection inside PDB. So, and now I would like to go through the different departments. So, radioactivity, its core task is, of course, dissemination of the unit of activity. Some of you may know, and we saw before in the presentation, these activity standards and in use as well in the SEER system. They are provided by PDB, and that is one of the most important tasks this radioactivity department has. But they are also performing activity concentration measurements in air. So they have aerosol counters, collectors, and contribute with this to the German measurement system of air activity. Current challenges are AI-based methods for interpretation of gamma spectrometric data. So they want to make the best of their data, and so this is a current challenge here. So a little bit more in detail of the radioactivity department. They have several measurement facilities, especially the MMC, mass spectrometry, alpha, beta, gamma, spectrometers and counters, ionization chambers, large area source counters, and their national standards are, in this case, more primary, 4-pi beta gamma coincidence detectors, proportional counters, alpha spectrometry, the LC, cinema method, and double coincidence ratio method, probably known to some of you. And since short, they have a sample changer for 24/7 measurements of liquid scintillation detection. So this is a picture you can also find on the website of PDB. So their current research and development activities, just a selection. There's a European project, NUCLIM, so nuclear observation of climate research in order to assess the greenhouse gas emission estimates. Then there's a project on RadarNet, so radar sensors for big buildings and future cities to make sure there's no issue. And then they are bringing forward digital services. So the digital calibration certificate, which will simply be an XML file, but in a structured format that it is machine readable. And then they are tracing a digital service for software validation. It's similar, Frederick, you mentioned for Monte Carlo simulations, and they want to provide a service for software validation of gamma spectrometry. So that's what they are currently tracing with gamma. So recent running comparisons, possibly of interest for some of you, in activity measurements here. They are in the CCRI active, also the CCQM, BIPM and Euromet, so for different radionuclides, as you see here, and not only pure radionuclides, but also a amino of uranium with soil or something like this. So these are the current comparisons. Stepping over to the next department, dosimetry for medicine, in short, namely therapy and diagnostic radiology here. They are mainly providing the diagnostic quantity air camera, radiology, and for therapy, they absorb those to water, of course, calibrate secondary standards, and perform type testing of diagnostic dose meters, because they need to be type tested in Germany if then used in clinics. Also perform controls of diagnostic and therapy dose meters, and are heavily involved in standardization work, national and international, here on this side. They have many radiation facilities, so at least 2 X-ray facilities, providing a vast range of radiation qualities, 300. So many of them are mammography, but not all, but also for radiation protection. All the radiation qualities provided in ISO standards. They have a gamma radiation facility, cesium cobalt, covering a huge dose rate range from environmental level of 100 nanograde per hour up to 200 milligrade therapy, cobalt-60 source, 60 grays per hour. They have 2 linacs, clinical linacs. They are using for calibration of ionization chambers from 4 to 50 MV for both photon and electron measurement and research accelerator. They have also one up to 50 MeV. They have CT scanner and L9 secondary dosimetry system they are also running. Their national standards are, in this case, also all primary standards. They have some free air chambers, several cavity chambers, not only for cobalt-6 cesium, but also for iridium-192 therapy source, and a water calorimeter for cobalt-60 and high energy photon and electron radiation from the clinic accelerators. So research and development is right on the radiology side. They are currently preparing a new free air chamber. There's more than half a century old personalized CT, machine learning dosimetry, X-ray imaging dosimetry, and quantitative imaging personalized dosimetry. So from the image, conclude the dose. On the therapy side, they are choosing the flash therapy, MR guided, and improving traceability within Europe and abroad. Medical imaging, the image quality here is also a topic of interest for them. They are running many comparisons under BIPM, key comparisons, but also servers link, especially here in this case in GolfMed and earlier times they were also active in 𝐸𝐴𝐻𝐸𝐻 quite a lot. Radiation protection dosimetry, our department. So if you have questions, please do this. No, you can ask to every section. So we provide the realization and dissemination for photon and beta radiation protection quantities, or the operational quantities, all of them we are providing. Photon brachytherapy, the reference air camera rate, that is something like the source strengths you are using here abroad. Type approval of X-ray emitting devices we perform. Type testing of dosimeters for radiation protection. And we are also heavily involved in standardization work, especially at the international level. As current challenges are spectral dosimetric methods for environmental and radiological emergency cases. So our irradiation facility is similar to the one for therapy and diagnostic. We have 2 X-ray facilities, use the same cesium cobalt facility, but we have also monoenergetic photons for 4.4 and 6 to 7 MeVs. Dave, that is the 6 to 7 MeV idea you originally had at that time, high energy photons. Then we run positive phase facilities from 50 nanoseconds, that is for material testing, up to the millisecond and range, that is radiology. Then we have a pulsed high energy photon field of an accelerator, but attenuated by 2 meters of concrete. So radiation protection scheme this is. Then iridium and cobalt, both brachytherapy sources, and beta secondary standard irradiation facility. We have reference sites for environmental radiation and cosmic radiation and an underground laboratory, some 430 meters below ground, and a salt mine where we have only 1 to 2 nanosievert per hour ambient background in this salt mine. So we are able to perform well-defined irradiations with these radionuclides given above in terms of H*10. So for environmental dosimeter testing, of course. Our national standards are, for the operational quantities, we use secondary standards from NERCAMER, make spectrometry, photon spectrometry, and then determine the average weight conversion coefficients to the operational quantities. These procedures for us the primary standard. Then we have a beta primary standard, LDR brachytherapy primary standard. Those are exoperation chambers, and HDR brachytherapy standard cavity chamber. We also have for iridium-coal, as mentioned before. Finally, our research and development, harmonization of standards for photon fields. So the ISO 4037 applicability is in a current research project checked, tested to prepare a next revision of that standard. Biosphere is an interesting project for the indirect detection of the ozone shield, so the thickness. Personal online dosimetry, maybe the future dosimetry, you won't need any dosimeter at all, but you have video cameras spread over the room. When on dose rates inside the room, and from this with Monte Carlo and AI-based methods, you can deduce the dose of the person and at different organs as well. That's the future, but we are tracing in. Early warning networks in Europe and spectral dosimetric methods. Recent comparisons, we have no current one, is a beta comparison where also the NRC took place. Audrey was heavily involved. You can see here over top right, spread over the world. We took part in the H-10 measurement and the BIPM key comparison for brachytherapy iridium-192. Finally, neutron radiation, CORTAS neutron fluence. That is what I mentioned before. Fluence, whatsoever is known as SI unit, but also of importance for neutrons. They provide those quantities for radiation protection from neutrons. Their current challenges are high energies, that is about 20 MeV. Fusion applications, there are a lot of neutrons emerge. Cosmic neutrons for environmental related measurements and measurement of cross sections, neutron cross sections they are performing. They have radiation facilities for thermal neutrons, monoenergetic neutrons. I see these pictures should be mixed up. So in the middle is the thermal neutron. There's a facility for monoenergetic neutrons, and the lower right are the neutron radionuclide radiation facility. The national standards are recoil counters, recoil telescope, long counter, and fission chambers, as well as calibrated sources. So we have no manganese, but traceable here in this case to NPL. Research is neutrons in the environment, as mentioned before, nuclear fusion diagnostics and high energy neutrons. Their current comparisons are all run by BIPM, so key comparisons and supplementary ones for different energies and qualities. And finally, the administration, operational radiation protection at PDB is an administration. They perform the administrative radiation protection at PDB, where we have approximately 220 persons being occupationally exposed at PDB. And this section also performs all the official correspondence with our approval authority, and that's very convenient for us as radiation protection officers. It's very good. That's it for now. I hope this met your interest, and I'm open for questions to all of this.
So yeah, as Raphael told that I'm Susnata, a postdoctoral fellow at Carleton. I am today going to talk about energy calibration for the DEEP 3600 detector on behalf of DEEP collaboration. So here is the outline of my talk. I will start with a brief introduction to DEEP 3600 experiment. Then I will go over detector energy response. I will also discuss about alpha quenching studies at low energies. This split into two parts. In one part, I will discuss about how we develop a model of alpha scintillation quenching using DEEP 3600 data. And then in the next part, I will discuss the XE2 measurement is going on at Carleton University for validation of this model. Then I will wrap up my talk with a brief summary and outlook. So DEEP stands for dark matter experiment using argon pulsate discrimination. This is a direct dark matter detection experiment. It utilizes single phase liquid argon detector, and it is currently operating 2-kilometer underground snow lab facility in Sudbury, Canada. This is a teamwork of 100 researchers from various countries, and this photo shown here, this is from our last collaboration meeting in Ottawa. Now, let me discuss about main components of our detector. So this, in this image, it is shown this cross-sectional view of our detector. Detector contains about 3.3 tons of liquid argon, which is inside a spherical acrylic vessel. The thickness of spherical vessel is 5 centimeter and diameter is 1.7 meter. The inner surface of acrylic is coated by 3 micron TPB wavelength shifter that shift this scintillation light to visible light, and then this passes through light guides shown here. There are 225 PMTs installed, which are low radioactivity and high quantum efficiency, and those PMTs acquire those lights. Now, for dark matter search experiment, neutron basically mimics dark matter particle-like signal. So we need to mitigate those surrounding neutrons. For this reason, some passive neutron shield also had been used. So the gap between light guides are filled with high density polyethylene and styrofoam. Now the whole setup is kept inside the stainless steel shell shown here, and this is submerged inside water tank. Now this water tank basically viewed by 48 PMTs installed on the outer surface of this stainless steel shell, and this acts as the muon veto for our experiment. And now the question is how to detect this dark matter. As we know that in our universe, only 5% is ordinary matter, that the visible thing like star, galaxies, planet, etc. And around 26.8% of this universe is dark matter, which interacts gravitationally with ordinary matter, and it doesn't have any electromagnetic interaction, so it doesn't emit, absorb, or reflect light. Now there are many astroparticle observations. From that we can believe the existence of dark matter, but its particle nature till not discovered. But there are many theories. One of the promising theoretically motivated candidate is WIMP, which full form is weakly interacting massive particles. This is one beyond standard model particles. Now, this expectation is that when WIMP falls incident on liquid argon, it elastically scatters of argon nuclei, and that will create scintillation light. Then we will acquire those lights, and like any other direct dark matter experiment, we are basically looking for excess events over background. Now, what is those backgrounds? Those backgrounds could be beta decays, gammas, alpha neutrons. In our case, this is beta decays from argon-39 isotopes, external gammas, radiogenic, cosmogenic neutrons, alphas from different detector components, and alpha can come from dust particles suspended in liquid argon. There is various reason of choosing this liquid argon. Let's start with this scintillation time profile. So this scintillation time profile is very different for nuclear recoil and electron recoil, that help us to define one PSD parameter, which is called F prompt. This is basically gives us total amount of photoelectron in the very prompt window of signal. And if you plot that as a function of photoelectron detected, we can see separate two bands. One is for nuclear recoil, another is for electron recoil. This part is coming from full energy alpha decays, which is again backgrounds for us. And this is the region of attenuated alphas neutrons, and dark matter region of interest is at very low energy here. Now, other reasons is liquid argon has a high scintillation light yield. It's transparent to its own scintillation light, and because of lower cost and high abundance of argon, we can make a big detector, which is very important for rare events such like dark matter. Now, let me discuss about the energy response function for our detector. So we calibrated our detector with beta decay spectra from 39 argon, which is naturally occurring radioactive isotope. Parameterization of this beta spectra to electron recoil data basically gives us energy response function. So in this plot, these black dotted points are data, whereas this blue line is argon 39 model. This green dotted line is backgrounds, which could be gamma rays or 39 argon pileup events. And basically with that fit, we get this red line shown here. This has been cross-checked by various monoenergetic gamma rays, and we see that our energy response is linear up to 1.46 MeV. After that, it is slightly non-linear. We follow different energy response method for calculating that for at high energy. So for high energy case, we basically used amnesium beryllium source data. In this figure, there are different tube you can see. These are basically calibration tube. Amnesium beryllium source was lowered into this tube, and then we acquired our data. This gray region here is basically our data. Then we performed a simulation, Monte Carlo simulation, basically GR4 based simulation to obtain the neutron capture gamma energy spectra. Then we feed this Monte Carlo model to amnesium beryllium dataset, and that gives us quadratic energy response for high energy region. Currently, we are defining our model by considering contribution from other isotope other than that is shown here. Now, let me discuss about the detector response to alphas. So here I have shown the photo-electron peak distribution for alphas. The peaks in this within the box are basically coming from full energy deposition by alpha particles. This is coming from in this region, and this peak is basically originates from any contamination in the inner surface of AV, basically coming from 210 polonium. Now, unlike betas, for alpha particles, fraction of deposited energy is dissipated as scintillation photon, which is known as quenching factor. Mathematically, we can write it in that form. Here, numerator is photoelectron peak that we can calculate by fitting each peak by Gaussian distribution and taking mean of that peak. This Y is basically the light yield coming from calibration, and this is the total energy deposited by alpha. Now, we are focused on measuring these or understanding these alpha scintillation quenching at low energies, because we have two challenging alpha backgrounds for our detector. One is alpha decays within trace amount of dust particles dispersed in liquid argon volume, and other is alpha decays from 210 polonium, the flow guide which is installed in the neck region of our detector. In both cases, it produces dominant backgrounds at low energy region, either due to shadowed light or due to degraded alpha energy. So in order to correctly model these alpha induced backgrounds, we need to understand this alpha scintillation quenching at low energy region. So we basically developed one energy dependent alpha scintillation quenching. Sorry. Energy dependent scintillation quenching curve, and we quantify the uncertainties of extrapolating the quenching factor to low energy region. And in my next few slides, I'm going to discuss that. So in our model, we consider contribution from energy transfer to nuclei, which is we call nuclear quenching factor, and other is contribution to atomic electrons, which we will call electronic quenching factor. And our final quenching model is basically product of these two quenching factor. Let's start with nuclear quenching factor. In this figure, this black dotted line is basically nominal curve for this quenching factor. It is calculated from TRIM software. This is basically ratio of energy loss in ionization to incident energy. We also calculated the uncertainty band for this quenching factor. We estimated by assigning 10% relative uncertainty to the energy transfer to nuclei and electrons. This reflects basically maximum deviation of stream stopping power from the experimental data. And we got this gray band shown here. Now, coming to the point of electronic quenching factor. So for this quenching factor, we consider 3 data point. One is absolute quenching quenching measured data point from 210 polonium source. This has been done long ago by TDOC experimental group. We use those values, and recently we performed relative measurement of these two alpha peaks with respect to that peak. This is mathematically shown here. We have taken in this calculation ratio of P peak position that basically reduces the effect of nonlinearities in the light detection efficiency on estimation of quenching factor, and taking this ratio basically makes this analysis less sensitive to absolute energy calibration at high energy. Now, these two are defined as R2 and R3, and we calculated the uncertainty of this P ratio also. This is around 0.2 to 0.4% from our data. Now we define one, we proposed one model. This mostly follows Bark's formalism. In this equation, it is shown that the fraction of energy deposited in a small step converted to scintillation light. Here A is the average quenching from the energy deposition density in the track core. B is basically change in density with energy, and this is electronic stopping power along this alpha track. Now, using this equation and the 3 point I told about in my previous slide, we define our chi-square equation in that way, whereas these two coming from data, these two are coming from model, and these are the uncertainty coming from experiment, or experiment, like this is from TDOC papers and this is for deep. Then we basically calculated chi-square for different A and B values, and for the for the lowest chi-square, we got this red dotted line shown here. Then we draw a 1 sigma contour on this AB parameter space, and we use different values from this contour to calculate quenching factor for different energy. Now, this 1 sigma band shown here basically generated by quenching curves from the Ō space, which is consistent with data by 1 sigma level. Now, this is our final quenching curve, which is the product of nuclear quenching and electronic quenching. So these black dotted lines are the nominal curve, and the gray band is 1 sigma band. So from these results, we can say at high energy, electronic quenching mechanism is dominant, whereas in low energy, nuclear quenching becomes important. And validation of this model is currently going on through direct measurement covering the low energy region at Carleton University. Next few slides, I am going to talk about that. So at Carleton, in Carleton University, there is Carleton Noble Liquid Lab. There we have a modular liquid argon detector, which is called Argon 1. In that detector, there is a liquid argon cluster which contains 35 kg of liquid argon, and this is the acrylic vessel. Within that, it has only 10% of this mass. Now, we have currently the full data acquisition and purification system, and data has been taken with 2 SIMPOM installed there, just to opposite face of this acrylic vessel, and shown here also. This whole setup is inside a stainless steel vessel, inner vessel. Then this setup is also inside one outer vessel. This is not shown in this image. And currently we are improving our signal detection techniques by installing 4 SIMPOMs, and that will have then 225 individual channels. And for those SIMPOMs, basically it gives us a unique granularity of 3 mm² channel area. Now, for this work, we need low energy alpha quenching sources, and we need also benchmarking for the measurement. So we made the measurement of alpha quenching at high energy with 220 radon source, and that served as benchmark of measurement at low energy. And at Carleton, we also developed low energy alpha source. And at the early stage of this development, we got a significant amount of help from NRC. Basically, Raphael Galea helped us a lot in that case. And then currently we have 210 polonium source, which is coated with copper and gold of different varying thickness. And these are the energy spectrum currently we have with those low energy sources. This is the spectrum we can see when we deployed this source in our detector. Now in analysis, basically we take this input spectra, we convert that with detector response model, and then we fit it with this data we observed. And in the fit, there is a free parameter, which is quenching factor. So from the best fit curve, we get the quenching factor for energy. So this is the result we have. The band here shown is basically the band I discussed earlier, and this point is from 220 radon decay chain. All those energies are around 6 MeV alphas. Then these are the for polonium sources, and this basically consistent with our developed model. Currently, analysis is going on with including systematic uncertainties, and at this moment, measurement at sub MEV region are constrained by detector threshold. So let me summarize everything. So DEEP 3600 is the largest operating liquid argon dark matter detector with excellent pulse shape discrimination technique. It has a leading sensitivity for high WIMP masses above 30 GeV for argons. We have performed our calibration at low energy using beta decay from 39 argon isotope, and we cross-check that with several monoenergetic gamma sources. Currently, the energy response is linear up to a few MeV. Then at higher energy, it follows quadratic response function, and it is determined using the N-capture gammas within data. This data has been taken in presence of amnesium beryllium source. We also recently developed the energy dependent quenching model for alpha particles, and this is done by taking relative measurement using DEEP 3600 data. We also quantify the uncertainty of extrapolation to this quenching factor to low energy region, and direct measurement for alpha quenching at low energy is underway at Carleton using argon 1 is small modular argon detector and newly developed low energy alpha sources. Preliminary results down to 1 MeV till now is consistent with our developed model. So these are the all thing I have for today, and thank you all for your kind attention.